Hi, welcome to the Business Class ESL Break Room. We're a company of passionate language trainers and coaches. We're here to share ideas to improve our skills and strengthen the training community. Come in for some inspiration, leave with tips to apply to your sessions today. Hi, and welcome to the ESL Break Room. Today's podcast is something a bit different. We're here with Rachel Appleby, and you may recognize the name. You may recognize the name Rachel Appleby if you've got Oxford University Press's International Express in your cupboard, or you've been using Advanced Level Coursebook for the business series from MacMillan. Rachel is a well-known author for numerous ELT titles. She's also a regular speaker at the IATEFL events, both on and offline. And I'm excited that she's agreed to speak with us today from her expertise training high-level learners. And the reason I thought to invite her here is, personally speaking, in my experience as a trainer, I've found myself in a situation with A2 to B1 learners, but I don't always have the opportunity to train C1s. It may depend on where you're based as a trainer, but if that's your case, listen up, because Rachel's going to share with us some very helpful insights on how to handle and inspire and motivate these sometimes perhaps intimidating learners. So Rachel, welcome. Thanks for making the time to join us.
Sue, thank you. It's a real privilege to be on your podcast. Thank you very much.
You're kind. So yeah, for at least here in France, I may say that A2 to B1 seems to be the level predominant for our trainees. That may be different in Budapest where you are, or I know in Germany, we often have high levels. But recently we've had a fair few C1s and above. I thank Netflix. But I'd love to preface my questions with sort of, how are high-level learners different from our other clients and trainees if we're used to a predominantly A2, B2 range?
Okay. Well, I'm not sure how different the situation is. I think possibly in Budapest there are or in Hungary, or maybe Germany as well, there are more higher level learners. But maybe it's just that these are the learners that kind of land on my plate. I'm not sure. But I love teaching advanced level learners. I mean, I love teaching, I think, partly because, as I've said many times before, I think I learn more than I teach. And when learners are higher level, then I think there's much more natural communication that goes on. And I think one of the key things is really making a situation, providing a context where the learner can really speak about what they're interested in, what they want, what their whole environment is. Once you have more information about their background, then you're able to, I think, work better with them. So this is about, a lot of it is chit chat. It's not redundant small talk chit chat. It's actually chit chat that you're going to take a lot of information from, picking out not just topic areas that pop up that you can come back to later, but language, because an advanced learner can communicate, they cope, they deal well. They have, certainly in most cases, they have the language of their interests. So they have that vocabulary because they've learned it, they're interested, they might have read or listened to text which interests them, so that's not a problem. It's the other areas that might be more difficult. One simple example, a business person may well have the language for their business area, but actually really struggle with small talk. And so that's very typically an area that you might work on with a business learner at advanced level. They tend either to be very fluent with lots of mistakes, the kind of mistakes that they've been making forever and ever. These are sort of fossilized errors. Or they might be the kind of person who wants to speak very accurately, in which case they're not going to be very fluent. So you tend to have one or the other type. They nearly always, they're frustrated because they know they can do better. Quite often they know what they can do in their own language in L1, and they want to be able to do that in a second language. And that's why they want lessons. So they tend to have the confidence to communicate, but they know they can do a better job. They also, something else that's quite interesting, and this is something where you really need to promote communication. They know what they don't want to cover or to deal with in a lesson. Quite often, if I'm working mostly one-to-one, but also with groups, quite often I might suggest something with a one-to-one or even suggest something for homework. It never gets done. They don't state, I'm not going to do homework, or I'm not going to do this. They simply, oh, I didn't do it, sort of apologize. Mm-hmm. So they know what they don't want. What they do want, however, they don't always know. So I think you have to really try things out, experiment, provide that same variety that you would in any sort of language teaching context, and see what they like, what falls, you know, on good land, good soil, and is going to grow and flourish. And in a minute, you know, I can also talk in more detail a bit about skills and about vocabulary and grammar and pronunciation and so on. But overall, I think this is the kind of profile: a student who can cope, is frustrated, has some areas which they're very strong at, other areas which are frustratingly, you know, they're not good at. And there are different things they're going to want. One of the easiest areas to focus on is to start trying to iron out the little mistakes that they're making again and again, and they begin to be quite wearing on your ear. You know, you hear the same mistakes again and again. So I always have, you know, pencil and paper where I'm you know, listening very carefully to the student, but I'm actually jotting down a lot of things that, you know, we're going to look at these kinds of things. So ironing out mistakes, focusing, as I do with all levels of learners, on chunks and phrases. Quite simply, something that came up in a beginner class with Ukrainian teachers on Saturday, something simple like, you know, I'd like a, there you are, thank you. And you're not going to focus on, you know, I would like, and all the grammar there. There's just, you know, no way on earth you're going to be dealing with that. But this little chunk, I'd like a salad, I'd like some fruit, whatever the little chunk is, and there you are. These sorts of things, even at low level, are important, and just as important at high level. You don't necessarily need to go into every grammatical aspect always, but provide that chunk. This is what we say in this context. So
the automatic phrases that they're going to use over and over in social context.
Yeah, I think so. You know, like, you know, you're welcome, or anytime, or, you know, whatever you like, whatever that phrase is, you know, something that they feel they can just use and is going to make them feel comfortable and confident, and it gets probably no reaction because it sounds natural from the other person, if you like. Something else I always also promote is loads and loads of reading and listening. Whether it's you know, it doesn't have to be sort of focused business topic stuff, anything, whatever they want to listen to that they're interested in listening to or watching, Netflix, TED Talks, anything. They'll come up with stuff. I'll suggest more things. We talk about it, you know, in follow-up lessons, to get them listening regularly to good, or, you know, natural English. And the same goes with reading. And what I also think is quite nice, if they're, you know, supposing somebody says, well, I'm really into photography, or I like to take photos, then I would suggest not simply, you know, an article that I found, you know, about taking photographs, but lots of different things. So, you know, are they looking at a manual? Do they understand the technicalities of using a camera, or are they reading blog posts about people who take photographs? Or maybe there's an article about all the underwater stuff that they do for the David Attenborough programs. Whatever it is, try to have a topic in mind, but the widest variety of sort of text types as possible, to help them break out of the little world that they're working in. Sorry, I've just thrown a load of stuff at you, but
it's fabulous that you've just intuitively answered all the questions. You know, what I had wondered, and you beautifully addressed, was what are they looking for, and also what could you suggest would be an empowering stance for the trainer? And you just gave it to us this by telling us where they're going to be frustrated and what they need. That helps us come to them with, okay, I've got something for you and I can help you. Which is fantastic. And that can be an issue, I think, for some of us.
I think sometimes trainers feel a little bit concerned or worried that they haven't got, you know, their own understanding of advanced level English grammar or whatever to be working with. that's largely not what the issue is. There might be a language point that comes up in a lesson. It's certainly not every lesson, I find. Much more typically, it's about reminding a learner what skills they have in their own language, and that these can be transferred into another language. Or, you know, throwing an article at them and saying, oh, I found this the other day, you might find, you know, you might like this. And they come back and say, wow, I really enjoyed reading. And you think, yes, you know, this was fine. It's much more about, I think, real, you know, natural communication. But with instead of just sitting back with your coffee and relaxing and letting the conversation happen, you're, as a trainer, you're really proactive. You're keeping your, you know, those you're alert all the time for any language issue that you can, not a whole grammar point to explain, but something you can simply iron out and say, we don't say this, we say this usually, or that's a bit more formal, this is a bit more natural, we would say this. So the language and the topic, and all the time I've got these, you know, I'm alert, I'm keeping my ears and eyes open for what I might be able to focus on in order to personalize the classes as much as possible.
That's fantastic. May I ask you, what do you feel about, I find it's often decoding pronunciation and decoding the way a native speaker would run words together, and the way we actually speak sometimes can be a problem, even for high level people. What would you have?
Absolutely, yeah. I often find that we have the subtitles on Netflix upstairs because I'm watching stuff with my husband, who is very high level English. But if it's, you know, Glaswegian, or even if it's sometimes, you know, American or a different English, you know, I can't pick it up either. So it's a good excuse for me. And I think that's one thing to do. So to listen again and again to stuff, to watch it with subtitles. And if it's something like Netflix and it's something good, like I think I mentioned to you the other day, a student of mine wanted suggestions for series on Netflix. And I mentioned Line of Duty because I'd been hooked. And it has some really fairly tricky vocabulary in the first few episodes, because it's all about the police force.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a specialist area of language that I'm an expert in. And not only did we have the subtitles on, but I was checking words on Google, you know, what do these words mean? And I thought she might find this really interesting. She was mixed sort of C1, C2, lacking confidence kind of student. And I hoped that we would be able to look at some short extracts. And by the next lesson, she'd binged watched the whole thing.
Oh,
so
fun.
It didn't quite work with her. But I think I think she wanted it for entertainment as opposed to, you know, language development. But I think watching maybe one episode or even a 5-minute slot of something more than once, and you watch it twice, maybe with the subtitles, then you go back, you turn the subtitles off and you think, you know, did I catch that? Go back again. You can also put it on in translation, have subtitles in a different language. But if we're talking advanced level learners, that's probably not necessary. So I think that's a kind of a fun thing to do. But what I would do more seriously with pronunciation, I think, we've got all the TED Talks we can look at, and I'll perhaps come back to that in a moment. But with this particular student that I have in mind, the one who binge watched Line of Duty, she was really pleased to listen to podcasts and stuff. She had a dog and she was doing lots of walking, and so she would be plugged into her phone and listening to stuff. And I recommended a number of podcasts. One's available on an app called Overcast. Now, there are 3 apps I use for listening to podcasts. One is the Apple Podcast, which is the purple circle, the regular iPhone app.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you can change the speed that you listen to a podcast on that. So you can listen to it at, I'm just checking it now. You can listen to it at different speeds. And here we go. I've got one here. I tested it, I think. I do it for Spanish because I'm not very good at Spanish and I like to slow things down. So here's one, and I know that I can turn it down to, I've lost it now. You can, but there's a function where you can, I think, move it from speed 1 to 1.5 or down to 0.75 or so on. And what's different about Overcast is that I think the changes are, would you say, more incremental? Is that what I mean? There are smaller changes in the speed. So you can change the speed to suit your level of listening. So you might drop it to 0.75 and then up it to 0.8, 0.85, and then maybe to, normal level.
Fantastic.
And there's another one, the Google app for listening to podcasts isn't a specific speed change, but it's on a dial. So actually you can set it at anything.
When you say on a dial,
it's on a dial, so it's not either at 1 or 75, but you can actually move it to 76, 0.77, 0.78, you can really move it much more subtly.
Oh, interesting.
And I know on YouTube you can listen to stuff and you can change the speed to 0.75, but I think the Overcast one I think was better, although not all the podcasts I wanted to listen to were available on Overcast.
Mm-hmm.
I have in my mind a workshop one day, probably for an IATEFL conference, about podcasting. And it's been at the back of my mind for about a year now. And excuse me, one of these days I will get to grips with it. And because I think, listening to loads and loads of stuff is really, we know now that, our teens from the last decade are now in their 20s and their English is good.
Mm-hmm.
I had students at university who said, well, when I'm watching this series, I can anticipate what this person is going to say when something ridiculous happens because she said it so many times before, and you think, wow, this is fantastic.
It's very true.
It might be a shortcut and it might not be a very academic approach, but hey, if their listening is good, their speaking is going to be better. Just as we know that if you're a good reader, you become a better writer.
Absolutely, and you're interested. I think there's no harm in it, in that it develops an interest and it keeps them coming back for more.
Yes,
and
I think so.
If you have high school kids or college kids who are happy to keep working on their English, they don't even recognize they're doing it.
Well, absolutely, absolutely. I did have one student I was working with who had more than enough English for the job he was doing. He was an IT guy at this company, had more than enough English, but wanted to carry on. And I kept providing articles from the press or blogs or whatever about him. And then he said, I found this. He came to me one lesson and said, I've got this. And he was into Japanese cartoon films.
Oh, yes.
And so every week he would, in advance of the lesson, he would send me a text he'd read. And he would highlight half a dozen words that he really wasn't sure about. And then we'd discuss those and play around with those and look at them and so on. Not that he didn't have a dictionary, but it was a way for him to let me know kind of what his level was and so on. And I would look at those words and think, well, actually, this word isn't important, or this is a really tricky word. I've no idea. It's all about some technical film issue. And I would look it up and we'd discuss it. And he was really motivated because he chose the text. You can't get input that's more personalized, it worked really well for him.
That's it, personalization.
And I couldn't find a text every week, to suit his interests, because he was, a very different kind of guy. He was a vegan, he was into Buddhism, he would travel to Thailand, all sorts of things, that another world for me. So yeah. I learned masses. It was great. I loved it.
That's the great thing about this job, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
I did want to ask you specifically, since we're talking about this shadow reading, or having a learner read along simultaneously. Did you say a word or two about that?
Yeah, you mentioned pronunciation a little while back, and I didn't really address that either. Yeah, I think this is something that you have to demonstrate in a lesson to kind of show how it works and to show the benefit. And something I do is I'll find a TED talk by a speaker with either an English probably or an American accent, which I know that perhaps that particular student is, more sort of interested in imitating, if you like. Obviously on a topic that I know they'll be interested in. And I'll find the TED talk, and they might have already watched it or something. So they might have an understanding of the whole topic. And I'll pick out maybe 3 lines from the talk. You usually have the transcript underneath the talk, and I'll put it on a document and get them to first of all think about where these which words are stressed and which words might be linked together and where the pausing might be, and then listen again to that little extract by that speaker and see if it matches. And it may or may not be the same. Obviously there are different ways of doing it, but if I think this is a speaker that my student is happy to emulate, to imitate, to experiment with the idea, then I'll suggest they try to speak along, so shadow read, kind of really just speaking to yourself, with the subtitles, up there while the speaker is speaking. So they're really, if you like, it's as if they could stand in for the speaker, another time. But it sounds a little bit, maybe it sounds a little bit robotic, but it's something about helping a learner understand the rhythm of a language, how words are linked together, how they sound, and also raise their awareness. Oh, so these words together, when they're said fast, oh gosh, this is how they sound. But ultimately, it's simply an exercise to raise awareness of where a speaker, a native speaker or a high-level speaker, would naturally pause, which words they would stress, what happens to the intonation, does it go up or down or why, and how words sound when they're spoken fast. So if they can do this little exercise on maybe a little, 2 or 3 lines once or twice, it's going to raise their awareness, and I think ultimately it helps them understand an advanced speaker or high-level speaker text, and this is going to help them when they're speaking. The two things are, they're two processes. So first of all, you've got to raise the awareness of, what is going on when this speaker speaks? Why can't I understand them? Or why is it a bit tricky? So raise that awareness, see if they can do it. And then perhaps look at something that is interesting for them. I work with lecturers at university or people sometimes who have to give a presentation. So they are public speakers, if you like, as well. And I might work with a short extract from one of their talks or presentations, and perhaps the introduction, the conclusion, and help them with how they would deliver that to sound natural. I think one of the things, and I would say this is the same with French and Spanish, is that these are, and Hungarian, these are syllable timed language where most syllables get the same amount of stress. Certainly in Spanish, this da 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 da, comes in. Whereas a language like English, you can move the stress, you can put it where you want to, and you have to, fit in all the other words in between the spaces, like this. So sometimes you only have one word in the space, and sometimes you might have, more. So it's a stress-timed language. It's like, the first beat of the bar in music for anybody, any musicians out there. And I think this can be quite an eye-opener for speakers of a language which is very different. And I think, first of all, obviously, you need to raise the awareness and then perhaps practice it. And something else I think is really important to say, and this also, so I'm talking about not just about the rhythm and the delivery, but also about pronunciation. And there is a big movement that we should not be ensuring or enforcing that our learners speak with, British, Queen's English kind of English at all. We should be aiming for comprehensibility, that they're easy to understand. So having a French accent is glorious. I would not want to change that, because I think it's lovely to listen to. And as long as I can understand what's being said, I think that's important. I think what matters is when we're listening to somebody and it becomes really quite hard work and tiring to listen to them after a while. And one such learner I was working with last summer, who is perhaps upper intermediate level, but learned English years and years ago at school, and he speaks in a very hesitant way, and after just a minute you're thinking, gosh, how long can I listen to this? So we did a lot of work on chunks of language and pausing, linking sounds together. He'd no idea that if a word begins with a vowel, you might link the previous consonant. He said, wow, this is amazing. And we went much further with that. And by the end, he was really he felt more confident. He was happy with this. So I wasn't imposing anything on him that he didn't want, but that really helped him.
I think for the right kind of or specific kind of learner, it really is very eye-opening. I've had a similar experience recently, and this man was saying to me, like, oh, now I get it. Now I know why I don't understand, with the linking and the...
Yes, because what you hear and what you see can be really, different. And so many course books just don't include that, integrated pronunciation. It's just not there. And I know that a lot of non-native speaker teachers are really, quite nervous about doing a lot of pronunciation work. But I think this is why, using something like TED, where, the speakers by and large are great, they're good models to work with. even if they're a little bit, contrived and, they're theatrical, but, they're good examples, and it's all out there. It's all free to use, which is great.
Truly, the topics are interesting, and they're not all native speakers.
But no, not at all. No.
Yeah.
No, not at all.
Fabulous. Rachel, this has been fabulous. You have just gone right for it. Exactly what I was hoping to help our listeners with, just kind of how do we approach that high level learner? Is there anything, one particular activity or game or task that goes over well for you in this kind of situation?
Something I really should mention is perhaps vocabulary. And I think this kind of ticks a few different boxes. So first of all, looking at words which students are misusing. There are so many words in English that have lots of different meanings, like, say or put or worth or all sorts of different words. And they think if they know the word, they can just use it, in the same context every time. But of course, we use these words in many, many different ways. And I think it's worth looking at perhaps just one of those words and kind of all the different contexts we might use it in. And this can be a bit mind-blowing and a bit overwhelming for the student who I thought I knew what this word meant, and I clearly don't. So you can't do it all the time because you kind of shatter their confidence. But I think it's really important. And there's another one which is really typical, the difference between in brief or in short and shortly. And quite often somebody will say, shortly, let me tell you. And they don't mean shortly, soon, in 10 minutes. They mean, I'm going to tell you, in brief. So these really little things, perhaps between non-native speakers don't go so noticed, but I think with high level or native speakers, they do. So I like to look at those little things, short and shortly. Another one is practically and in practice. Which actually are very different. The difference is quite subtle. And I think one of the sources that's really useful to look at is something called Lex Tutor. It's a website. It's a Canadian website, Lex Tutor. And if you go to Lex Tutor and you look at the collocations, let me get the link up for you. There's a specific section on that page which is really great, and you can type in a word and you can see dozens and dozens of different examples of how that worked. So if you open Lex Tutor, lextutor.ca, because it's Canadian, you get a multicolored page up, and in the second column, I think the one I want is concordance. And you can choose from a corpus in various languages, English, French, Spanish, and so on. I'm obviously going to choose the English one. And when you click on concordance and English, you get lots of boxes to fill in. So I would just put in, for example, I'm seeing if this is going to work, the word relative in the top box. There are lots of boxes, and I just put one word in the top box, and I might use, for example, the Brown BNC written corpus, which is the British National Corpus of Written English. If you want spoken colloquial English, you would want a spoken corpus. But just
that's amazing
detail. Demonstration. If you put this word, you get the word relative in the middle in blue, and on either side the context of all those examples. Now, at the moment, I've got 100 hits, but there are 51 million. It's a bit like doing a Google search. Now, this is a bit of a minefield for a student, even at advanced level. And it's something I've yet to get my students, on a high about, but I get very excited about it. But relative is an interesting word because sometimes it means, your brother-in-law, but sometimes it means, well, it's according to, with regard to, and in relation to, and what's the connection between. And I think if a student is misusing a word and you think they would be interested in seeing, well, how does this word work? Then outside of class, have a look at and see how this word works, whether it's in a written context or a spoken context, and choose a few examples only. I'm going to choose an easier example, which is the word worth. And I get, for example, operational worth. It's worth the search, it's worth making, it's worth saving. if they know their own worth. So it's used in lots of different contexts. And I would choose some of the most typical situations and examples, and perhaps choose just 5 or 6 and look at, how does that work? What is the word that comes afterwards? Is it a verb? Is it in the gerund form? Is it actually the word being used as a noun or a verb, or so on? And I think that can be interesting for somebody who's a language-minded student, a technically minded student. Not many of them are, but I think it's quite fun to have a look at.
It's great to know, and not many of them are, but when you get that one who is, you may be feeling like, goodness, how can I satisfy this?
Well, it's a bit of something, because that's life's work in investigating all that. But I know there was another one similar that you mentioned called Lingy. I don't know if that's how pronounced, and I'd like to mention that because it's a little bit less overwhelming and perhaps more accessible, and that's lingue.com. And it comes up in a number of different languages. I was having a look at the Hungarian. I thought this was really nice. So the one I've got here, I typed in the same word, relative. And I get a list of short paragraphs with that word in it. And then on the right-hand side, I get a list of those paragraphs translated into Hungarian. Now, all the examples I've got here are really, none of them are about my sister-in-law, the relative, or anything. They're all about relative stability, or let me have a look. Let me try a different word and see what comes up.
Yeah, it's true. I think it sounds a little less technical than concordant.
The
Lex Tutor, sorry. Yeah. Indeed, but it does just give you a sense.
So we've got here under worth, it's worth noting that, it's also worth noting that it's worth hundreds of billions of dollars. Measures are worth up to 200,000 euros. It's worth at least twice the cost. So I think it's a little bit more manageable. And this was something I hadn't come across before. And it also gives you the translation. So I think Lingy is really nice. I would investigate that further with my students for sure. Thank you for that tip, Sue.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Right.
My goodness, Rachel. Well, this has been so helpful. This is really, you're a wealth of information. And really, I think anybody who's starting out with a C1 or is going to feel empowered.
Well, it's just a few tips. It's perhaps a little bit, speaking off the top of my head, I think. But what I have done, which I'm not sure if you wanted to mention, but I wrote some blog posts about teaching advanced levels. One is about grammar, one is about, I think, vocabulary, one is about listening, I think. I forget what the fourth one was. And those are on a blog that I have, which is really just a library of resources. It's a series of posts I wrote for Oxford University Press, and that might be a little bit more digestible if anybody wants to follow up those. It's on Edu Blogs, and it's under my name, Rachel Appleby. I think it's probably easier just like that rather than providing a link. I'm not sure, unless you...
Well, I will be happy to put a link in the text part of the podcast. That would be fantastic. Thank you.
Anyhow.
Yeah, we'll make sure those links are available to people who watch and listen to this. So that's just fantastic. Thank you. And so if you'd like to share with us what's coming up for you in the future.
What's coming up? Apart from the beginner Ukrainian students, which is really a rather different world, which was a new project we've just started this week, actually, in Budapest. I'm in Belfast at IATEFL, and I really hope there are going to be lots of people for a face-to-face conference finally. IATEFL Belfast is happening middle of May.
Exciting.
So that's going to be very exciting. And I'm just coming to the end of a semester with my advanced MA students at Corvinus. These are writing students. So they do a lot of writing outside class and a lot of discussion and liaising and text crafting, sentence crafting in class. They're super advanced, and I really struggle with it. What I like to do with them is pick up occasionally some mistakes, and then the next lesson I'll take, a spot the mistake, 10 sentences, spot the mistake. And they really enjoy that because they know these are mistakes that as a group they've made. They're all disguised, so I make sure that I don't point out who made the mistake. But with these groups I have this year, they're getting higher and higher level. I really struggle to find those sorts of things to deal with. So it's far less about language and much more about, sort of genre analysis and style and online writing as well. So social media writing we do. So it's very different.
It sounds very exciting and
Lots of stuff.
fantastic. Well, thank you so very much for taking the time out of your very busy, clearly busy schedule.
You're welcome. It's great to listen to all the other podcasts you've had. But they've been fun. I'm really enjoying those too. So.
Oh my gosh, thank you. I'm so glad you find them useful, and wish you the best of luck at IATEFL.
Thank you. Well, good luck with all your next interviews and visitors and guests.
Thank you, Rachel. And best of luck with the Ukrainian project. That is something to be proud of.
That's fun. Sure. That's the teachers we have working with us are great. No, it's a good team.
Excellent.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Well, thanks so much for your time, and we'll let you go.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us in the Business Class ESL Break Room, the podcast designed to bring business English trainers useful ideas, inspiration, and conversation that motivates. Follow us on Instagram at business_class_language and subscribe to the ESL Break Room playlist on Spotify, Deezer, or Apple Music for new episodes. See you next time.